contract. And I think we're like this close. And this is the, she's willing to accept this, which is the same thing the town hall employees have. 3.75, 1.75, 1.75. Oh, so do you want me to do this?
Besides this, can we just...
Oh, we can talk more about it, sure. I'm just telling you where we're up to. Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
What's that?
I'm gonna let you just keep it going.
Oh. Well, now I'm not
Please.
ready. Okay.
He did a fine job in your absence.
I'm sure he
I
did.
did it once before. So.
Yes. For a whole year, in fact.
Yeah. So let's see, we have one item left, which is discuss fire management letter with MRI.
Oh, I love my pen.
Come on up, gentlemen.
Be right back. I've got my pen. Where's my pen?
Hello.
Hello there. We're back again.
Yes, you are.
All right.
With a new platoon on the field.
Yes. So are you set for us to go?
Yep, go right ahead.
Okay. So thank you for having us back. I'm Brian Duggan, Director of Fire Services for MRI, and I sound very loud right now, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was actually, I felt the same way. We'll just turn it down. Just, Nancy,
Pat?
Pat, can you turn it?
Can you turn the volume down just a little bit?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'll try that again. Again, I'm Brian Duggan, Director of Fire Service Operations for MRI. With me is Robert Loomer, and tonight we're going to sort of walk through and have a discussion pertaining to the management letter. So the letter itself, I wanted to start with sort of an overview of it. The goal was an analysis that would identify current issues and challenges within the department. And two of our folks were assigned to that. One was Peter Finley, a retired fire chief out of New Jersey, and the other was Chief Loomer. The management letter initially was estimated as a 10-page document, and giving that, or being it that we want to give quality to the town, we ended up at well over 30 pages of a well-written letter with the idea that that letter could really spur some future positive change for the department and development of the department. So as we focus on sort of recommendations, they'll be really focused on a positive and productive future. So clearly, some of the recommendations that we're going to talk about tonight do require bargaining, and you need to sort of have that as a cautionary note with that. So one of the things we want to talk about is sort of as we started, we tried to identify what is the town's expectation for level of service. So the Mendon Fire Department provides fire rescue services to the town, including advanced life support, as you know, and patient transportation. To that end, we summarized that the town expects the provision of basic fire protection, fire suppression, rescue services, emergency medical services at the advanced life support level, and including the response of a rapid response of at least one unit. So that's how we sort of had the foundation of the management letter set, is what is the expectation of service in the town, and how is the department able to meet that. To that end, we developed 11 significant issues that are facing the department and in many ways frustrating them from reaching toward that level of service. The first is leadership and supervision, the vacuum that currently exists in the department. So at the time of the analysis, both assistant chiefs were out on leave. Although one has returned, there is the absence of a dedicated fire chief, and we certainly know Chief Kersey is doing his best to move the department forward, and I think he hopes that is on a temporary basis. Wow.
Sure. And just to follow up with that, what we observed during our visits was that there, although on a day-to-day basis, the guys would, answer the call, but to look towards a long-term vision and leadership, the vacuum that Brian mentioned was evident. We're familiar with how the town had managed its fire services in the past, but that created a decade-long vacuum, which, quite frankly, that coupled with the role of the two assistant chiefs created some real problems for us in that both gentlemen seemed to be uncertain of what their specific roles were. Now, certainly when it comes to answering the alarm, all hands on deck. But as we all know, there is much to be done between those alarms. And we found that those organizational requirements just oftentimes were falling aside. We'll speak later to the issues of training and promotion and so forth, but that was what was most troubling, was actually the organizational structure.
So continuing along that theme, with both assistant chiefs being absent, that produces sort of a lack of day-to-day supervision from an officer corps. And there were several notes within the management letter that really talked about organization in the department and productivity. To that end, we also interviewed the assistant chiefs and found that, as Bob said, there were some communication issues and some relationship issues of them working together as a team.
We couldn't help but notice that the current structure involved a situation where we had two assistant chiefs. However, it was a little bit unclear to us. One had the title of senior assistant chief. And again, that, even though both of those gentlemen were out during the time that we did the assessment, we did meet with each one of them separately. One of the issues that we found, usually for chief officers within a department, their alliance was obviously to management. Both chiefs are members of the bargaining unit. And more importantly, the senior assistant chief, really the second in command of the department, was at the time of our assessment serving as the union president. What we're saying here is it's difficult for any of us to have divided loyalties, but to have a person who is in that position essentially leading the union, it seemed as though perhaps his interests lie more with labor than with running the department, to be very blunt about it. Thank you.
And that's, obviously, that's not a usual and customary situation that we
No,
have.
sir, it is not. No. You may occasionally find a mid-management person, a lieutenant or a captain in a larger fire department, who takes on that role, and that's a difficult role. Make no doubt about that. Labor needs a strong representative, but usually, particularly in this situation where we had previous to Chief Kersey, you had a public safety director. We really had one fire person who was supposed to be, leading the fire department. Now, Chief Kersey obviously is doing that, or did that for quite a bit of time, without either of those two gentlemen being. I understand the senior assistant chief has returned to work.
And certainly, it's well observed by our team and well documented that there is an ongoing contentious and at times toxic relationship between the senior assistant chief and the town. And while we tried to sort of look past that for solutions, they were elusive. I'm going to ask Bob to just elaborate on that based on his observation while I was here.
Well, again, both assistant chiefs were vacant their positions during my time here, both serving as Chief Kersey's technical advisor and also gathering information to put this report together. But it was clearly evident to us that there were divided loyalties within the organization, that there was really no sense of who was responsible for which element of the day-to-day management of the department. And that was very, very apparent. It's important that we point out here that, our observation was primarily just to point out that we saw a situation that was contentious, in some cases adversarial, but we're not saying within our report, which is a public document, who's at fault, and we struggle to find a way to fix it. But it was extremely clear to us that this is a situation that we have to get beyond.
Well, I don't really understand that because on a day-to-day basis, the department would not be interfacing with the, in quotes, town. So how is it that was so obvious on a day-to-day basis?
Are you talking amongst the troops, or are you talking about the interaction between the department and the town?
What we sensed was that there seemed to be divided loyalties. There seemed to be that the personnel that were on duty were good folks that were answering the alarm. But when we would speak to them about who do you report to for this issue, who handles maintenance or training, there were a lot of people that just were uncertain, unclear, and that's troubling.
And you attribute that to the management oversight?
Yeah, yes, I did.
Okay.
Okay, but that still doesn't answer my question. I
Right.
thought you'd said that, I thought you had said that there was, well, certainly we understand that there's a contentious relationship between some in the department and the town. Okay, that's a given. I got that. But I thought I heard you say that it was something that was apparent to you on a daily basis. And I'm wondering how it is that could have manifested itself on a daily basis. I'm not saying you're wrong, I just want to understand what you mean.
I think you're misunderstanding.
I could be.
I think I think what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that I heard there's a contentious relationship between some of the senior management of the department and the town. But then then I heard you expand on that further, that is within the department as well, and that's based off of the management of the department.
That's correct, Chairman. It was clearly reflected in that it was known that there was a contentious relationship, and that can't help but reflect in anybody who's part of an organization.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
And I think in the management letter itself, we talk about how sort of that spillover effect affects morale within the organization and ultimately operations. That if people feel they're involved in this tense situation, they're questioning everything about operations as they go forward because they're not sure where they are. So I think that's what we're saying, is there's a spillover effect from one into the other that needs to be recognized by the town.
And again, that's clearly management oversight.
So, the next of the 11 was concern relative to ALS staffing, specifically the number of paramedics and the ability to maintain the ALS service. And that was something expressed not only by ourselves, but ultimately a concern that is echoed by the state oversight as well.
So when we looked at the service delivery model that you folks had put together, the department had put together, it was to provide services at the advanced life support level. It became very readily apparent to us that at the time of our visit, there were actually 3 licensed paramedics full-time within the department. 2 of those paramedics, being the senior assistant chief and the assistant chief, were vacant their position. So obviously, it was concerning to us that really only 1 full-time employee at that time was a licensed paramedic. We were aware that with Chief Guerzy's guidance, that he was working very hard to solve that problem. Again, I don't know how things have progressed, but I do know that at the time, 2 of your full-time career staff were attending paramedic school, and I hope they're moving quickly towards their certification. And that for a while, Chief, you had brought in some per diem help specifically to help us out on the emergency medical side.
Yeah, so I'd like to just comment on that, just to make sure anybody listening is completely clear that, it didn't necessarily take you folks to make sure we were aware of that, right? I just wanted people to know that we totally understood that that's a situation we're in and had the analysis activity going to figure out what we were going to do about it. So But thank you very much for that.
And if I recall, that was one of the reasons the board asked us to come in, is concern about providing that higher level of service to
How
the
we get to it.
citizens of Mendon and how we get there. So after we finish a couple of more sort of the challenges facing the organization, we're going to start to talk about recommendations and more how you get there.
Okay?
Well, we next looked at how the department does recruitment, retention, and hiring. Again, we're looking at past practices. I don't think any hires took place during the time of our visit, but we were somewhat dismayed to find out that there were full-time career staff who had been retained and hired without undergoing a basic medical evaluation or a strength and agility examination. Although that may have been the case many years ago for public safety officers, it is very much the standard today. As you know, your public safety officers, when they come to work, we want to hire folks that are healthy, that have no pre-existing medical conditions, that have the necessary strength and agility to perform what is an extremely dangerous job. So part of our recommendations, which we'll address later on, is that those things need to be addressed as well. So you have a formal screening and hiring process that does follow federal and state guidelines as far as hiring folks. And those guidelines were not in place at the time of our visit. Perhaps you have already started to move towards those. Beyond that, we get to basic training, if you will. And again, in all public safety today, there are basic training requirements that are pretty stringent for every element, including the fire service. For virtually every call fire department in this Commonwealth, cities and towns require, and rightfully so, that they undergo a training process of recruit training at the call and volunteer level that ultimately leads them towards a certification. Just as your EMTs or paramedics are certified, today the firefighters across the Commonwealth are, for the most part, they're at a national certification. It's a standard that obviously we use as professionals to make sure that they have the core competencies to perform their job. We found that there were a handful of people that did have the Firefighter 1 training, but for the most part, whether it was the career department or the call department, it was not the case.
Excuse me, so are you recommending academy-trained firefighters, or are you recommending firefighter 1 and 2
If I could,
essentials?
yes. Fortunately for the cities and towns of the Commonwealth, whether you're talking about a call firefighter or a full-time firefighter, training is available to the cities and towns at no cost whatsoever for either one of those personnel. And it's put together in such a way so it's easy for, well, it's a commitment, but it allows those, first of all, that are called to go through a training process that includes both actual training as well as online, is structured so that they attend training evenings and weekends so that they can continue to pursue their regular career. And that period of time usually takes about 4 months for them from when they enroll until they finish up. I'm going strictly from memory, but I think it's just shy of about 300 hours of contact time.
So that, again, I'm not sure if you answered my question completely.
I'm sorry.
So the firefighter essentials 1 and 2 is one branch of training, and then the other one would be the recruit
That's
training.
correct.
So which one are you recommending, either or?
What we recommended is that as you go forward hiring call firefighters, which we can see that you're going to predominantly stay a call fire department, that through your recruitment and retention, that you let folks know that, we want to support this, but you'll need to make a commitment. And that commitment is that we need to get you trained to a competency level of firefighter 1, 2 in the call and volunteer program.
Gotcha, okay.
In a similar fashion, should career personnel be replaced, that process takes place on a full-time Monday through Friday basis at one of 2 campuses, one being in Stowe, Massachusetts, the other being in Springfield.
Is that the academy?
That's the academy, correct.
Okay. So basically what we're saying then, to simplify it, is academy for full-time, firefighter 1 and 2 for a call.
That's what I'm hearing.
Right. It ultimately leads to the same certification. So on the good news front, I know I can tell you from personal observation that recently there have been a few people from Mendon going through the call-in volunteer program. So that is a very positive step in the right direction that should clearly be recognized within the organization. The ultimate goal is certification to the national standard. There are departments that will attempt to do that themselves. One, it gets fairly costly, and two, over our experience with communities across Massachusetts, it tends not to work. The success rate is very low versus if you send them to the academy, which is free, the success rate is very high. So we'd recommend one coupled with the other, both on a full-time basis and on an on-call basis. Certainly on the on-call basis, you really want to incent and encourage people to go and pursue that certification for that. So, and I think the last part of that was also a concern relative to officer training and certification, that the team did not see evidence of any significant either officer training or certification within the organization. The last one sort of speaks to where the rubber hits the road of what is the service level. And there is a significant difference in the service level when there are career staff there or per diem staff, and when it's primarily an on-call agency. And every agency, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go through it, that's a call agency or volunteer agency across the country is struggling to recruit and retain people. So the solution to that is clearly redoubling efforts and incenting people and really trying to bring them in the door. But right now, there are elongated response times at night during those hours, with the average being a 17-minute response time. And given that Mendon is 18 square miles, that we feel is an excessive response time.
And did you go as far as, I haven't gone through the detail of it, but as far as the hours in the evening, is it from like 11 till 7 a.m.?
11 to 7 was
Okay,
that statistic.
okay.
And within the management letter, there are several charts and breakdowns of what type of calls and so forth and responses. So,
Okay.
so those are the 11 challenges that face the organization. Significant as they may be, we also feel that we can produce several recommendations to move the organization forward. And just like to take a minute and recognize Chief Kersey that he's really tried to already look at some of those and take forward steps within the organization. So the first is sort of that leadership transition of we need to sort of keep going down the road. I know the community has made the decision to go toward a fire chief, and we need to continue down that road sort of with the big picture that person is going to be the ultimate producer of change over time. But that change needs to be paced and controlled. So while the management letter is a source of input, that person is going to have to operationalize that stuff. Bob?
Sorry, before you continue on there, I just really an opinion on my side, but I understand what you're saying, but by the same token, I don't think if we are able to make any changes that produce better response times and service to town of Mendon in the interim, I think we have an obligation to do that, even if we don't have the new fire chief in place, because you've got to believe that they're going to want to make those changes anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was the source of my compliment toward Chief Kersey, that he's tried to do some of those things already. I know he's juggling things as well.
Yeah.
But
I think I've maxed out certain changes, beyond what we have to do. We need someone else to come in at this point, or we need to make decisions. We've maxed out ALS service, for example. When I went in, I created 7 ALS shifts a week, 7 BLS shifts a week. So before, it used to be if someone took a day off, no matter who it was, they would just go through a rotating list. So if the person up was BLS, then all right, Sunday's a BLS now. We're not ALS. I did away with that. If an ALS guy takes it off, we fill it with an ALS guy.
Okay, so that would imply then that you feel like we've done something better than the 17 minutes we had. Maybe not as
No,
good
the
as,
17 we can't improve. That's 11 to 7. We're
11 to
call.
7.
We're not going to change that.
unless we change from something other
We
than
go full time at night, or we do some kind of option.
Okay, so you must have a recommendation in there for that then.
Yeah, I mean, there's really a source of two solutions. You could hire more career or per diem staff and provide an initial response crew on a 24-hour basis, or you can choose to invest in a much stronger, much bigger call department that would then provide that resource. For a community of this size, we're recommending that you first try and really support the on-call aspect of the department and build that out. And that takes effort, it takes investment, and it takes a commitment.
All right, sorry if I threw you off your tempo.
No, that's fine. So you want to handle table of organization?
So as we looked forward towards the
Can you just tell us
leadership,
what page you're looking at when you're going through that?
We're actually working off a presentation document.
Oh, okay, never mind. Okay, all right.
We're trying to follow along in the management.
Yeah,
I would have to correlate that. It does, in general, follow the progression of the management letter. It was,
so in our recommendations moving forward in restructuring the department, and I understand the town has already, decided that they are looking towards a singular fire chief, but we looked at the table of organization as it currently stands, and it did not seem to adequately represent the type of organization that your town has. Your department has, and I think will continue to have, a predominantly call firefighting force. Ironically, no members of your call force hold the rank of officer at all in the current structure. Since your makeup would be predominantly call, we think it's only right that there be a call member of the department that would serve at a senior level. And while we agree that what's needed here is a full-time fire chief who can be both dealing with the day-to-day administrative and leadership issues as well as pitching in operationally when he needs to, or she needs to, that the next person in the chain of command should be somebody who's picked from the call fire department. So, and I apologize, I don't have the reports in front of me, but perhaps, Brian, you could point them to our suggested table of organization.
So I find that interesting, right? Because that right there alone is counterintuitive, not having any fire expertise, that you'd have one of your ranked officers from the part-timers when you have other full-timers that may not have a rank. So that's very interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, that's not uncommon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so page 10 is the table of organization.
I'm sorry, what did you say, 10?
Page 10 of your report.
And it looks something
Got it,
like that.
got it.
Okay. So as you can see, as we're recommending, obviously the fire chief would run the organization, but his immediate subordinate would be a deputy fire chief who would come from the call ranks. And as we've used color there to delineate basically 4 squads, if you will, 2 groups would be led by, 2 of the career groups would be led by lieutenants. So we think that that day-to-day supervision, that sort of operational supervision, really is something that typically a full-time fire lieutenant would do. And conversely, with the call forces as well, that there would be 2 junior officers or lieutenants so that you'd have good supervision.
Yeah, that clearly provides a unifying capability that you wouldn't have otherwise. I like that.
It's actually, what's interesting is it's the same structure that we had prior to 10 years ago. Exactly, to the T.
So again, this is significantly different from the current organization, so just be mindful that prior to any implementation, there's going to need to be discussion and bargaining as you go down that road.
So how do you, and if it's not appropriate to talk about this now, it's fine, but how does the deputy fire chief, the deputy chief, as a call person, how do they get compensated appropriately for that responsibility level?
Some towns do it as a per diem position, some towns do it as just an
Stipend or
on-call
something,
hour
or-
position.
Or maybe they get more than the other call?
Right, others do it as a stipend.
Okay,
I
so there's
think
multiple ways to do it.
If I had to pick the most popular that we've seen, it's the stipend.
Yeah, that's what I would have guessed too.
Yeah. In respect to hierarchy, would that mean if the deputy were to resume, the officer in charge, for example, and a full-time lieutenant were to show up, that full-time lieutenant would be subordinate to the deputy fire chief, is that correct?
Yeah, and we're also suggesting that the deputy needs to be a position that's developed over time, and that they get the appropriate fire officer credentials and certifications prior to being put into that position.
Okay.
I think that goes without saying, gentlemen, that obviously these positions are not there to fill, but only to fill when somebody's ready to fill them adequately.
Sure, of course. Yep.
And as we mentioned earlier, there's much work to be done in not only basic training, but also in officer development. And again, if I could, one more pitch for the State's Fire Academy. Whether it's basic training for recruit firefighters, or it's training for your officers, or technical training, training that's available throughout the state, not only at the 2 campuses, but across the Commonwealth, it can be brought to a community. The cost is zero. The cost is zero. All you need to do is sign up. So-
And this is something that is going to have to be evaluated over time as you go to develop someone. If someone isn't there, then you need to make different choices. And that's where I think the importance of a fire chief comes in to help make those choices and guide the organization down the road. But we really see it as this is a time to, one, strengthen the organization as a whole, support both the career, per diem, and on-call people that are there now, but really focus on trying to build out the on-call aspect of the department to bridge that service gap that we pointed out.
Yeah.
So,
And just finally, to follow up, beyond forming a new table of organization, what we recommend be done here is, whether we're talking about the chief, the deputy chief, the career lieutenants, or the call lieutenants, each and every officer within a department should have not only operational responsibilities, but also administrative, day-to-day routine tasks. So it's clearly delineated who might be in charge of training from day to day, who might oversee fire prevention, emergency medical services. And our experience has taught us that people that aspire for these leadership positions want a taste of that. And so we would see that for both the call folks and the career folks as well.
So next up is sort of a return to prioritizing the on-scene times and a reduction for that. So we tried to quantify that, and again, the average on-scene time from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. is 17 minutes. A reasonable goal for an on-call department during those hours is 8 to 10 minutes. So the goal that we've established within the management letter is 8 minutes 90% of the time. And the 90% is purposeful, that if you're in the middle of a blizzard, it doesn't matter where you're going, you're probably not getting there in 8 minutes. So there's a 10% exclusion, but if you add up things across the year, 90% of the time,
You show up
the
in 8 or
first
10
unit
minutes.
should be on scene within those 8 minutes.
So what are the major levers to get into that, right? So if we're at 17 now, and we want to be at 10, and we're going to continue with call staff, what are the levers you can move to reduce that by that 9 minutes?
Yeah. I think a lot of it goes to recruitment and retention programs, incenting people to become involved. So one of the things that we threw out as a discussion is health insurance, and the idea of letting members of the call department buy into the town's insurance at a prorated level based on their percentage of response.
Okay, but see, that's not really answering the question to me. That sounds like a secondary thing. So in other words, the reason we do that is to get more call guys, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
recruitment and
so you're
retention.
saying that the lever is more call guys, because if there are more, the more that are out there, the bigger chance you got of somebody getting to scene quicker when you do a call. That's what you're saying, right?
That's one aspect of it, and the other aspect is, with the proper amount of incentive, people tend to participate more. So we did a study within the management letter. There were 4 people that participated about 25% or less,
Okay, I don't understand the definition of the word participate in this.
responded to calls. When the bell rings,
They show up.
you have,
Okay,
right now.
so they can decide on their own whether they show up. I thought a
Call-
general recall, everybody shows up.
No, and when you're on call,
Try and call.
you're on call. I
So-
mean, your tone goes off, you show up or you don't. I mean, that's,
So the
At your own discretion, so nobody could show up.
Yeah, and right now, the percentages that we found is 4 people presented 25% or less, 4 people participated between 25 and 50%, and 2 people participated above that 50% level, which realistically, above 50% is really not to be expected. But when you start to produce some of these incentives, people are going to start to want to participate more to gain some of the incentives.
Yeah.
Another common incentive that communities use, especially between the hours of midnight and 7 or somewhere in that vicinity, it changes based on community, is a number of hours as a minimum response. So there are tools that you can employ that we'll touch upon in the recruitment and retention section. So,
Okay? So that's 2 metrics. Yeah.
So we talked about the goal, and obviously the ultimate goal is to provide sufficient personnel on the scene to effectively and efficiently deal with the emergency. So we also recommend that the town formalize automatic aid agreements with surrounding neighbors and partners and build those out more than what they are now. And I know the chief has been sort of going down that road, but we've seen for a reported structure fire in areas where there is a call or small departments such as this, that up to 4 or 5 departments are toned upon the report of a structure fire. That means maybe Mendon provides 1 unit initially and Hopedale provides 1 unit, and you get all of these converging to produce an effective force to rapidly deal with the situation.
So, in response to that, what is our mutual agreements? I know the chief's been working really hard to establish a good relationship with our surrounding communities.
And he has.
And he has, but prior to that, how would you define our relationships with our surrounding communities, based off of your investigation?
So I guess, Bob, that would go to you.
I think the
boots on
key
the ground.
words were prior to Chief Kersey. We sensed that
Tossing the
prior to
potato, are
Chief
you?
Kersey, there were not formal agreements in place.
I see.
And
Okay. That's what I was trying to figure out.
Right. So by building out these agreements, you increase the operational effectiveness and ultimately benefit the town. It produces sort of that regional concept. A question we're commonly asked is, isn't that overwhelming for the other communities? Well, hopefully Mendon would also participate in the long run with those other communities in the same agreement. And if you look at the number of actual reported structure fires in Mendon in a year, we're not talking a significant amount of calls.
Yeah,
we're
right.
talking a very, very small percent, usually about 2% of the overall calls that would generate that level of regional response to maximize effectiveness and ultimately keep your firefighters safe too.
Okay, so the only way I see automatic aid agreements impacting that 17-minute metric is if sometimes they show up before we do.
Right.
Because if they don't, it doesn't improve the metric at all.
Right, that's a tool, depending on the location of the incident, another unit may be closer.
Okay?
It's one of many tools, or as you put it, levers that you need to use.
Yeah.
Certainly, the ultimate one is to build out the level of participation both on the career and on-call side and the number of on-call members
Yeah,
to
I got
produce
that.
that greater force.
Do folks typically put any effort into geographical distribution of the call, or is that not something that you worry too much about? Because I would think that the better sprayed they are around town.
Right. Years ago, yes, I can remember departments that would have waiting lists that would say, well, we want someone from up here. That's not a luxury in today's day and age.
Gotcha.
If you get someone that
Just don't
is
have the scale
committed-
to pull it off, yeah.
Yeah, and many communities, they're actually allowing people from other communities or adjacent communities to come in and offer service.
Gotcha.
So. All right, so I'm going to quickly touch on facilities. We noticed a couple of things. One was a second means of egress from the second floor, and we recommend that sort of the building commissioner really go through the building and identify what needs to be accomplished to make it code compliant, and then prioritize those actions. We feel strongly about the second means of egress. We felt strongly about upgrading the fire alarm system, and then seeking grant funding through a federal Fire Act grant under the health and safety category to eventually, hopefully, sprinkle the station with its own water supply.
Let me get this straight. So you're saying the fire alarm system in our fire station is insufficient?
That is correct.
You know what's unbelievable with this, and a little,
sorry.
well, and a little concerning
Yeah.
is that technically that fire station is only about 6 years old
As a fire station?
as a fire station. And we had a significant capital expenditure on that building, with architects and building committees, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously, there's a architectural stamp on there saying it's code compliant, and I'm hearing it's not code compliant.
Is that what you're saying, or are you just saying you'd recommend better than it is? Because it's really two different things.
Yeah.
Well, to be clear, there is not a requirement under the state building code that a fire station be sprinkled. However, if you think about this, from 11 o'clock at night until 7 o'clock in the morning, well over $1 million worth of fire apparatus is sitting there. Right now,
Without people in there potentially?
our investigation revealed that the fire alarm system within the building was essentially local only. So if a fire broke out, the alarm would sound, but nobody would hear it. It didn't go anywhere. And obviously, there was no suppression in a building that would, I can only point to a community right next to where I live, Concord, Massachusetts, which just suffered $1 million loss of a fire station that was at the time occupied. And so, no. We realized that you folks were able to find a home for your fire department in a commercial structure. And we commend you for doing that. It looks as though that facility could serve the town for a while. But basic fire detection, basic fire suppression, and making sure that life safety issues such as a second way off that floor, I think would be money well spent by the town.
Yeah, okay.
And I didn't know about the fire alarm system, to tell you the truth, but it doesn't go anywhere, so I'm actually gonna work on that tomorrow with custom alarm. That's something we should work on immediately.
Custom installed it?
No, custom alarm can put a system.
They should be able to take care of it,
Yeah,
yeah.
they do all of our electronics with the police station.
Or just
Sure.
go to a central station or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. We should have something like that.
And if recollection serves me right, the management letter goes into some more specifics in the fire alarm system and some of the deficiency. But you want to look at fire alarm, carbon monoxide, those are life safety issues for people in the building. And then there's sort of the aspect of it reporting off-site so that if no one's there, there's a reasonable chance to save something.
Save the equipment, yeah, yeah.
For that. So,
Okay.
in terms of apparatus, very quickly, the next purchase of a pumper when it comes up in the capital plan should really also be a rescue pumper, which is typically a little larger. It's a multi-function unit and it allows you to consolidate sort of where equipment is stored and produces a better overall function. The other two recommendations, one is that a brush unit be eliminated from the fleet, and the other is that as a new ambulance is purchased, that a second ambulance be maintained, so that if the first one is down for maintenance, there's still an ambulance there. Realistically, most of what the department does is EMS related, and to have that backup unit is really an important part as the department grows and moves forward. And that-
We had really hoped to be there by now, but have not been able to buy the
We got other things to
new.
take care of first.
Well,
Well, as we touched on earlier, really, one of the paramount needs in the department was to come up with a comprehensive training program. We talked earlier about basic training, we talked about officer training, but we meld that all into a training program that's managed by the chief officer of the department. So whether we're talking about basic recruits or we're talking about people in senior management positions, they have the training they need to do their jobs. We strongly feel that this can be accomplished with just good management. This is not really a big money item, as we've mentioned earlier. Most of this training, whether it's basic or at the advanced level, is available through the state. There should be a program not only for the specific training that we referred to, but also the training that takes place currently in the call fire department, or actually it's a department-wide function. At the time of our initial visit, we interviewed some of the firefighters and asked them, you have training twice a month. Is there an established curriculum? In other words, I'm a call firefighter, I'm coming home from a full day's work. Do I know that we're going to be talking about self-contained breathing apparatus or pumping. And the honest answers at that time, and I believe it was being rectified, was, no, we kind of show up and train about what we'd like to train on. You need more structure than that, obviously. You need to have a full-fledged training record for every individual, so you know not only where they are in training, but how we can help them get to a better place. There is existing right now a good system where twice a month, the department comes back for training. Working with Chief Kersey earlier this year, I provided him with some guidance documents that might help put together a simple curriculum so that the call firefighters, as well as career folks, know what training will be offered, that people within the department, everybody's a trainer. So folks within the organization that are technically versed in one element or another get a chance to be the instructor as well as the learner. But all of that needs to be defined, and there needs to be strict training requirements. Some of that has already been addressed during the time that the chief and I spent together.
And then there are other aspects of training. That there's the National Incident Management System where all personnel need to be at sort of 2 certification levels, and then officers need to be at higher levels. So that needs to be produced, and also incident safety officer training, the idea of helping firefighters save themselves and having someone dedicated to their safety as an incident progresses. So there are certifications that are available for those things that are opportunities that we see that could really be leveraged as you go down the road toward that productive future I keep talking about. So recruitment and retention is sort of the final aspect here, and I'm mindful of our time. So we had several ideas within the management letter relative to recruitment and retention. One is pursuing a federal SAFER grant for recruitment and retention, which there are 2 types of grants. There's one for career firefighters and one for recruitment and retention of on-call personnel. We're recommending that, at least in the short term, you pursue the recruitment and retention aspect of that. And then several other things that I had talked about, the development of a strong and ongoing recruitment and retention program, and really focusing the organization on bolstering the on-call ranks are critical. There are many ways to do that. They're outlined within the management letter. We can get into them more specifically if you'd like. But mindful of our time here, I want to just maximize the opportunity to have any remaining discussion on that.
So I do have a general question. So in my line of work, I engage with consultants all the time. And my general experience is that consultants will give you recommendations on all kinds of things that range from meat and potatoes, really got to do it, to things that, well, you know, I mean, they really put everything they can in there to justify that, right? So I guess what I'd like to know is, have you outlined kind of in prioritization order, like what we should do, and how, and do you feel like everything you've recommended is really meat and potatoes stuff, and or there's some things that you might say, well, you're hitting the point of diminishing marginal utility with some of these others? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So again, realize that this was forecast to be a 10-page letter.
I knew you were going to go there.
And Pete Finley, who is not here with us tonight, could probably write 100 pages. So we've scoped him back to what we really felt were the nuts and bolts of moving the organization forward. To further focus it on that meat and potato aspect is, in the conclusion, we identify 20 items that are sort of the priorities for the next fire chief to work on.
Okay, so you feel like everything you've made for a recommendation in this 30-page report is already whittled down to that, really, this is the set of really gotta-dos?
Yep.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear, yeah.
In order?
Pretty much in order.
Okay, close enough.
I think some of it, you know, we were here a few months ago, even that's a snapshot, and you get the perspective of Bob and one other practitioner there. So as Chief Kersey makes decisions day to day, as a new chief comes in the door, they're going to have to go through and sort of prioritize those. For example, one is really focusing the department on a mission and vision and sort of the values of where are we going as a team. Another is trying to pull them together as a team through some involvement and interaction. Which is first? The chief's going to have to sort of have his ear to the ground and pick which is first and which is a priority. However, I think the ultimate priority is a service to the citizens, and those are some of the things that the chief's doing now on trying to look at that 17-minute response time, trying to make sure there's advanced life support moving out the door, and trying to produce a really effective operation. And with everything we've said, don't get the sense that we in any way wish to slight members of the department. They are trying to do an absolutely fabulous job with the tools and support and culture that they have. We're suggesting ways to improve that.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that's true on an individual basis. Absolutely agree with what you just said. Okay, so, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I know. So a couple of times you referenced our decision to go for a dedicated fire chief, right?
Right.
But you did not make an opinion statement on that. So I'm just curious. I'd like to know that you know, or maybe you say it in the report as to whether or not you think that's the right thing to do, or we'd be just as well served to have a public safety director.
Yeah, we absolutely feel there needs to be a singularly focused fire chief to bring the organization forward from the current position.
Okay. And you agree that the disciplines are sufficiently different so as to require a separate individual, separately trained. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely, and from my conversations with the chief, I think he would concur with that he's doing the best he can, but sees the need. Am I misstating anything?
What do you need a fire chief or some solution?
Okay, cool.
Well, I mean, very detailed,
Comprehensive, no question.
comprehensive. Thank you very much for the amount of effort that's gone into this. Clearly, we're dedicated as a board to move our community forward. We take public safety as, you know, the top tier of our priorities. So we're dedicated to making sure something happens here.
Yeah, I would say it certainly sheds light on some liabilities and service shortcomings that we need to work on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Does that conclude our?
I think we're
That's
just
the end of our agenda, except for executive session.
Nice.
I don't even have my glasses with me, guys. I'm cooked. Can somebody just read us into it? You want to read off the motions for
Yeah, he
executive session?
suggested we read it again, right?
Yes. Because I am the acting chair.
You are the acting chair, so thank you so much there.
Do that for
Thank
you.
You only want to
Chair,
bring in the relief pitcher on a cleaning.
Okay, I move to enter in, this is going to be long again. Move to enter into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, for two unrelated purposes. First is under Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares. Firefighting negotiations, JLMC update, and MUP-16-5314, unfair labor practice charge. The second is under Purpose 3, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or contract negotiations with non-union personnel for the town administrator's contract. We will reconvene only to adjourn. Roll call vote is needed.
Second.
Burke,
All in
aye.
favor?
Burke, aye.
Schofield, aye?